Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. And today we're wrapping up the Autumn to Remember scrapbooking kit by Stampin' Up. As you can see, I am down to just the scraps. Some paperboard pieces, a few stickers. I'm so excited to make the most out of these leftover pieces and to create one final single page layout. It's always satisfying to use up a kit, and I can't believe I'm at the end of this collection. At the end of the video, I'll bring in all of the other layouts I created with this paper collection. For my photo, I'm documenting a picture of my oldest son, Aiden. We took this photo while he was out hunting. I've already trimmed a mat to 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 for the photo out of early espresso cardstock. This leaves me with a 1/4 inch reveal. I love how the deep brown really makes the photo pop. Here's what I'm thinking for the design. I'm going to create a frame style layout using the brown cardstock as my outer frame, then the basic white cardstock inside. This will give it a nice contrast. Next, I'll use the 2 pieces of gray wood grain paper and I'll place them vertically down the page. The 2 pieces measure 4 1/2 inches wide and I'll cut them down accordingly. I'm going to layer the scrap pieces behind the photo. I'll stagger them at different lengths, cutting some of them to fit on either side of the photo. My goal is to create the illusion of one continuous strip of paper. This is a great way to use up the last bit of scrap paper, and it will add interest to the design, kind of framing the photo and drawing your eye to the center. Now, before we get too far and putting everything down, I want to add a little bit of texture to the right side of the page. I'm going to use this leaf mask that I purchased from the discount section at Stampin' Up. I'm going to use some embossing powder to create a soft texture leaf design. To prevent the embossing powder from getting where my picture and other elements will go, I'll lightly mark off the area with my pencil. My goal is here to have the leaves in the background, just adding a subtle texture that won't overpower any of my main elements in the layout. So now that I've marked the photo area, I'm going to clear everything off the page except for the white cardstock. I wanted to show you something I found. This tool is from Dollarama. It comes with 5 different spreading knives. But this one in particular is very similar to the older Cricut spatula, which has now been discontinued. So if you're in Canada and you're looking for a budget-friendly alternative to that spatula, this could be a great option for you to check out. Anyway, I'll be using this spatula to apply the embossing paste. I'm aiming for texture just in this area of the page. So I'm not concerned about using every single leaf in the mask. I'll be placing texture paste in only a few of the leaves here and there to fill up some of this space. I'm going to keep the embossing paste white to maintain a subtle background texture. I'll be working with small amounts of the paste at a time and applying it in sections. I'm going to try and keep it a bit random, just a few scattered leaves across the page. I'll keep going until I'm happy with the coverage. Once I'm satisfied with the embossed leaves, I'll set it aside to dry. I have sped up this process quite a bit, but I wanted to show you what I had in mind for this part of the design. So here's a close-up of the, completed leaves. I'm going to set this aside now to dry. So while that's drying, I'll move on to creating some of the embellishments for my layout. I'm pulling out the Changing Leaves Hybrid Embossing folder and its matching leaf die. I'm sure many of you are already familiar with how this works, or maybe you already have it in your craft supplies. Off camera, I went ahead and embossed and die cut several leaves from white cardstock. I absolutely love how the embossing adds texture and the die cuts cut out the images at the same time. This will give me perfect leaves to work with. To really bring these to life, I'm going to add some ink to them. I'm using a combination of Mossy Meadow, Pecan Pie, and Cajun Craze with my blending brushes. I'll start by adding the pecan pie ink to the middle of each leaf. Then I'll blend it out with my Mossy Meadow green, extending the color down the leaf. Then I'll come in with Cajun Craze, focusing on the middle too close to the tip of the leaves, blending it as I go. Lastly, I'll come back in with the pecan pie and add more depth to the tips and the stem. I will finish the rest of these leaves off camera. I'll also ink up a few of the embossed leaves that did not get cut out from the dies, and I will fussy cut them out after. My textured paste leaves are now dry and I think it looks amazing. But I am noticing that the white cardstock looks a little too bright. So to soften the look, I'm going to add some pecan pie ink to the edges. I'm using my blender brush again and lightly ink around the perimeter of the cardstock. This will create a soft, subtle hue. I want to be careful not to add too much ink. I'm going to dab off onto the silicone mat first, then I'm going to move the ink onto the paper. I'm just adding enough to create a soft gradient effect around the edges. It's a simple step, but it makes such a difference in giving the page a more finished, cohesive look. I'm going to continue off camera to finish the rest. Off camera, I cut out the center of the brown cardstock that I'm using for the frame. And I trimmed the white cardstock down to 11.5 by 11.5 square. I always like to place the adhesive on the bottom layer first to make sure I have proper placement. Now I'm going to bring the scrap pieces of paper back into play, using my pencil marks as the guide for placement. First, I'll lay down the wood grain paper on the left, just like this. Next, I'll add the tree pattern scrap, followed by the Forest Friends paper on the far right. The two square pieces with the triangle trees will go next to the tree paper, one at the top and one at the bottom. I'll cut the brown checked paper in half and place it on either side of the picture. I'm going to overlap the papers slightly, which will help create more visual interest and maintain cohesion in the design. Overlapping papers adds dimension and texture to the layout. It gives the design a more dramatic feel rather than looking flat and too uniform. Let me bring the picture back in to see how it looks. Now that I have everything in place, I'm just going to go around and stagger the lengths of the pattern paper. By varying the lengths, I prevent the design from looking too rigid or symmetrical, just like that. So I'm going to shift the gray wood grain pattern paper over to the edge. Much better. It felt a little out of place to leave that white strip there. So this adjustment makes everything look way more cohesive. Now that the pattern papers are arranged to my liking, the layout base is ready for embellishing. Here's how the finished leaves turned out. I did end up adding a touch of crushed curry to the center of the leaves, just for a final pop of color. In addition to the leaves, I wanted to mix in some pine sprigs to tie in the natural elements. I used the golden greenery dies for this, which have two different sizes of pine sprigs. I cut them out of Mossy Meadow cardstock. They provide a nice contrast to the warmth of the leaves. I also have a couple of sprigs I cut out of early espresso cardstock using some of the dies in the Changing Leaves die set. For the title, I'm using the Autumn Bliss stickers from the coordinating sticker sheet. I'm considering placing one word at the top of the page and then one maybe at the bottom. Or I could go for a more dramatic effect by placing the title down the one side. I'll play around with it and see what looks best. But before I start adding all the elements to my embellishment clusters, I want to ink the edges of the pattern papers. I'm using my ink dauber with pecan pie ink for this step. It really helps define each piece and adds dimension to the layout. I'll finish this off camera to save time, and when you see me next, all my papers will be distressed and attached to the layout. Isn't the power of editing fun? Everything is attached now, and I've placed 2 leaves on opposite corners of my pictures, which is going to be my jumping off point for my clusters. I want to get my title in place before I fill up the area with leaves and pine sprigs. I'm going to remove the sticky from the stickers with my anti-static pouch first, because I know I will definitely be moving around these stickers a lot. So as I was looking through the photos I have taken over the years, I've quickly realized that most of my fall pictures are hunting related. This picture I am scrapbooking today is of Aiden when he was 14. He is sitting between 2 hay bales, waiting patiently for a buck to appear. So I'm looking at the title here, and it feels like it doesn't have enough presence on the page. Since I don't have many hunting related stamps or embellishments, I turned to my Cricut for help. I found this great design, a circular shape that represents looking through crosshairs of a scope. I think by adding this element with the title going around it will be the perfect finishing touch. I'll place the sight circle slightly behind the picture. Now the brown mat is blending too much in with the circle, of course, because they're the same color. So I'm going to remove the mat. I sure am glad I inked the edges of the white border around my pictures earlier while I was working on everything else. This looks so much better. I'll start placing my letters for the title around the circle, beginning with the outermost letters, A and N. Working my way in from there will help assure even spacing around the circle. So I'm really liking how this title is looking now. The title needed something to rest on, and this element really does that. Plus, it also ties in the hunting theme on my layout. Let's move on to adding the leaves and the sprigs. I have a seam here I'd like to cover, so I'll use these elements to do just that. I'll place the pine sprig here, making sure it covers almost the entire seam. With the title in place, I want to make sure my embellishment clusters complement it without overwhelming the layout. For the cluster at the top right of the photo, I want it to add texture and interest, but not compete with the title. This will help balance the overall design and keep everything cohesive. Like I said before, I cut out a few sprigs from the Changing Leaves dies in early espresso to add to the clusters. These darker sprigs will help ground the layout and add contrast to the lighter elements. It's always a bit of trial and error process when adding embellishments, but it's fun to experiment and see what works best. So this cluster at the bottom of the picture needs something to give the leaves a place to come out of. I found this circle on my desk from a previous project, and I think it's the perfect size to stamp a sentiment, gone hunting or buck fever or something like that onto it. This will help frame the leaves and create natural flow while adding a focal point for the cluster. I'll stamp it in Cajun Craze ink, which also appears in the title stickers. This will help bring consistency to the color palette and keep everything feeling connected. Now let's stamp this sentiment together. I'll move the layout aside for a moment and grab my foam mat to ensure I have an even surface for stamping. I'll place the Gone Hunting stamp on my block by picking it up with the block. Then I'll practice on a scrap piece of paper, making sure everything looks good. I'm ready to stamp it on my circle. I'll line it up, aiming for somewhat centered placement. Then I'll hold it there to soak in for a couple of seconds. And voila! Perfect. Let me clean up my stamp and I'll bring my layout back into view. I feel like the circle needs something behind it to really make it stand out. So I'll cut another circle in Cajun Craze cardstock using one of my stitched circle dies from my stash. Now that's really coming together. The color adds just the right amount of contrast to make the circle really pop. Next, I'll add a few more elements to fill in the gaps in the cluster. I'll keep moving things around until I'm satisfied with how it looks. Once everything feels just right, I'll take some time off camera to attach everything down with my Barely Art glue, tape runner, and foam dimensional dots to secure it all in place. To repeat the Cajun Craze color in the upper cluster on the right side of my photo, I'll cut a tag and write the date on it with Cajun Craze Stampin' Write marker. To bring the wood grain pattern to the other side, I'll cut a circle from my scraps using one of my circle dies. By incorporating similar shapes and colors throughout the layout, I've created a cohesive design that draws the eye to the photo while leaving the perfect space for my journaling. I typed my journaling in Word, adjusted the text to fit inside the circle shape, and after printing it on white cardstock, I used another die to cut it into a circle. As I was looking at the sticker sheet one more time, I thought these two tags would make a great addition to this upper right-hand area here. Not only do they help carry over the wood grain pattern from the other side of the page, but they also repeat the brown tones, tying everything together while letting me use up more of those stickers from the kit. As an extra detail to my clusters, and because Aiden is sitting among hay bales, which are tied with twine, I decided to add some natural baker's twine to my embellishment clusters. I cut off a good sized piece, wrapped it around my fingers a couple of times, and I'll use a glue dot to hold the loops together. The glue dot also works perfectly to attach the twine to the layout. For the top cluster, I tucked the twine behind the leaf. Then I repeated the same process for the bottom cluster. While I was at it, I found these cute adhesive back dots in assorted sizes and colors in my stash. Two of the colors match so well with my layout that I thought, well, why not use them? I'll place a few of them around my embellishment clusters. To recap my layout process, I began with a frame style layout using white and brown cardstock. I used embossing paste with a leaf mask and distressed the white cardstock edges for warmth. For the background, I layered paper scraps behind the photo and added wood grain paper along the left side, incorporating pine sprigs and leaves inked in Mossy Meadow, Pecan Pie, Cajun Craze, and crushed curry. I created circular elements for the title using my Cricut, adding twine to echo the hay bales in the photos, and finished with adhesive back dots and a circular journaling spot. Repeated colors and shapes that helped tie everything together cohesively. Here is a close-up of my embellishment clusters. I'm really happy with how the leaves turned out, and I love how the title came together. So as I had mentioned earlier, I'm sharing all the pages I created with this collection. Each layout I'm showing today has its own process video. This first double page spread I made using this paper collection, and it's actually my first process video. For this layout, I used the Changing Leaves stamp bundle to create some of the embellishments, along with several stickers from the coordinating sticker sheet. For this next double-paged layout, I documented some camping photos. Even though this is a fall-themed collection, I thought it worked really well with these summer outdoorsy pictures. Here is the circle die cut that's only available in the workshop kit. Now for this double page layout, I did get creative and I made my own pattern paper using the leaf stamp from the Autumn to Remember stamp set. I also used the Changing Leaves bundle once again. Here's another double page layout where I created like a patchwork quilt design and I built my own pumpkin embellishments. And I didn't realize that this layout is on here backwards. So that's why it looks a little funny. This is a single page layout where I used the brown and petal pink pattern paper and cardstock, which was the perfect match for these pictures. I created the pinwheels using the Round We Go die set. So here's another hunting inspired layout where I used an embossing folder to create the background. It was so fun to do and I really like how this one turned out. The title here is a paperboard piece from the scrapbook kit. And for this last one, which is one of my most recent videos, for this layout, I followed one of the pre-designed layouts from the workshop kit. So that's a total of 5 double page layouts and 3 singles I created with one paper pack. I'm really happy with how much I got out of that. So I hope that this process video has inspired you and given you plenty of ideas for using your paper collection, but beyond just fall themed layouts. If you enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up. It really helps me grow my channel and I truly appreciate your support. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel. So if you're watching this video in real time, December 11th, this collection is now in the last chance selection on the Stampin' Up website and is only available while supplies last. Also, today is the final day for free shipping on orders. Here is a video YouTube thinks you might enjoy. For a closer look at this layout and all my others, check me out on Instagram.